Dominic, you've
Neil.
been the CFO of Team Sport now for circa 7 years.
7 years, yeah.
Including taking the business right up to a almost exit.
Yeah.
What are the things that people don't know about exit readiness?
I think the biggest thing for me is the amount of time that it takes to get ready. You know, we couldn't have done it with just our own resource that we have. You know, you need to get external support so that people can focus on the day job. I think for anybody, when you're looking for an exit, the most important thing is that the business continues to trade really well during that period. So having people distracted is really not great. So I think getting the right level of resource in place would be my number one tip. And I think a lot of that also comes from the world's quite different now. I did M&A in my previous career, and when I look at the kind of how data-driven things are now and the amount of information that people want and are able to consume is materially different. And quite often is the kind of data that you don't deal with when you're running the business day to day because of the volume of it. So it is, you know, you learn a huge amount. Hopefully it all accords with what you think you know about your own business, but it's, you know, it's very different, the level of, particularly, you know, when you're dealing with private equity and people who are very financially focused.
Yeah. And when do you start that process?
Not soon enough. I mean, I think when you are private equity backed, you know, you have to be constantly ready at any point. And so for me, it's about identifying what are the key KPIs that you think people will be looking for to maximize value. And therefore making sure you have a focus on those kind of all the time, really, to be able to work out when is a go or a no-go at any point. And those things will change over time, and some will become green and some will be red, and then it will all change around as the market changes. And so I think it's working out really early what those are. But I think, you know, in terms of timing, as I say, I think for me now it's you constantly are looking at it, making sure everything's in order. But I think when you think you might, you're talking probably 6 months, as a minimum.
Is there a real huge value in just getting an external viewpoint on how the business is viewed? Because I guess when you're internally, you think of the business in a certain way, and it's hard to maybe get that sense of market perception, and that it really gives you that kind of elevated lens of what the market actually thinks versus what the internal management team might view.
Yeah, I think that's right, but I think it also depends the sector you're in. If you're in restaurants, there's lots of comparables and there's lots of benchmarks. With something like Team Sport, where I am now, we probably have in the UK 10 times the number of locations as anybody else. So there isn't really a market as such for people to have a view on, or it's a lot harder, I think, for external parties to have a view. So a lot of it is about making sure that we're curating that story when you're doing it. But yeah, things change all the time, so it's difficult to, you know, the story changes sometimes as the market changes.
Yeah. And why and how go-karting?
Kind of by accident, really, I suppose, rather than by design. I've been asked that a few times, and I think the point is, and I think this is the beauty of being a CFO, is actually the final end product, in a way, doesn't really matter. Before go-karting, it was restaurants. So fundamentally, it's multi-site leisure, and it's around how you look at the business, how you set the business up, both operationally, but then also for reporting, and everything else, really. So there isn't really a difference. I am a bit of an F1 nut, so the idea of go-karting did appeal, and it's an amazing, fun sport. It's but I didn't set out to say I want to go and work in go-karting.
And tell us a bit about, obviously we've been through very challenging decade or more as a consumer and in the consumer space. It's sort of been permanent, one crisis after another. This year it's war kicking off. How do you navigate those challenges in a consumer business as a CFO?
So we have a very tight leadership team. We work together all the time. If I think of our COO, I probably speak to him 2-3 times a day, and we're constantly thinking, okay, what as soon as something happens, what would we need to do? As soon as the Iran crisis kicked off, for us, the biggest thing is, well, what supplies do we get from China? How's that going to be impacted? Therefore, how do we need to get as much stock as quickly? How do we need to manage fuel supply? It's less relevant now because we most of our sites are electric, but we still have petrol. So some of it then is immediately, look, how do we kind of guarantee stock of fuel? So a lot of it for us, you can't plan for everything, but we do have an awful lot of, we have a very detailed business interruption plan that tries to cover off most of the issues that you might expect. But things like a war in Iran is not something that was necessarily identified, but the things that could happen and therefore how we would react to it are very much laid out. So we've got a very set process. And I think we learned a lot from that through COVID. Look at that was a huge test. We were closed for a significant number of months during that period. I think something like 12 out of 15 months. And so we had to do some pretty drastic actions to manage the business through that process. And I think we've learned a huge amount from that. And it kind of makes you realize that the things that you think might happen, but you think will actually never happen, can happen. I think, when I look back, I think if somebody was to do a film about COVID and the whole world shutting down, you'd probably say this is a bit far-fetched. But that is the reality. So I think we've learned a huge amount from that.